Okay, I'm Colette Segan-Beagley, Assistant Director of the LGBT Resource Center. I'd like to welcome you to the Resource Center's ongoing conference, LGBT, Gender, and Sexuality. I'd also like to take a moment to welcome the RAs and the MAs and ask you to see Carrie, who's sitting at the back. Please, see her raising her hand. Yay. I'd also like to welcome our newest student organization, Graduate Queers and Allies. Please see Matt at the back, and he'll tell you all about this new student organization. And Allies and Advocates. These are your advocates on our campus, and they are enthusiastic back there. Yay! All right. The musical Rent will open this Friday, and it's being produced by our theater at Grand Valley along with the Heritage Group. Rent will run this weekend and next in the Louis Armstrong Theater. There's a table in the back, and I encourage you to get one of these postcards which tells all the times and dates of the play. Our next event will be our holiday party on Friday, December 11th from 2 to 4. So we invite you to the Resource Center at 1161 Kirchhoff for free food. Yes, and visit our website to follow our events or to look up that date and time again, and it's just gvsu.edu/LGBTRC. Also, you can follow us on Facebook at our fan page and on Twitter, GVSU LGBT Center. We value your feedback, and so we have evaluations scattered around. We ask you to please fill one out and drop it on the table before you leave. We really want to know your thoughts about our programming. Today's events commemorate Transgender Day of Remembrance, a day set aside to memorialize those who were killed due to anti-transgender hatred or prejudice. The events will continue this evening. Our student organization, Out and About, will host a candlelight vigil at the clock tower at 8:30, followed by a panel. Donna Rose will return along with 3 others for a panel discussing transgender issues and experience. That will be at Kirchhoff 22, 15, and 16. We're so honored to be able to have Donna Rose on our campus to headline today's events. Donna Rose is a nationally recognized speaker, educator, and advocate on transgender and transsexual issues. She's active in the leadership of several national LGBT advocate organizations and is heavily involved in corporate diversity efforts. Her website, donnarose.com, remains an active support of information for the transgender and about the transgender community. Her award-winning book, Wrapped in Blue, A Journey of Discovery, continues to be a source of hope and information for many. Donna's story is more than a simple journey across gender. It's a journey of self-discovery and self-definition. It's a journey to revisit decisions made about her and for her the moment she was born, and to reclaim her own destiny. It's a journey that features the universal human experience: courage, fear, doubt, sadness, happiness, and ultimately, fulfillment. In short, it's a journey to find inner peace. Please join me in welcoming Donna Rose.
Oh, goodness. But you did them so well. This is going down. I hate it when that happens. This is men's eyes when they talk to me these days. I'm just saying. Anyways, thank you all for coming out on a beautiful day like today. I started today, I was in South Carolina when I woke up this morning, and it was raining, and I haven't looked at the weather. I said, I hope it's not snowing, because I have made a lifestyle choice, and it's not the one you might think, but it's that I refuse to live in a climate where I have to put away my tole shoes. And so when I saw that it was going to be in the 50s today, I thought, this is fantastic. They really did. They're pulling out all the stops to make me feel welcome. But I am Donna Rose, and I want to thank y'all for taking some time to come out today, because it's really an honor to be able to come and talk about these kinds of things to groups of people. I realized that the perceived subject, and I use that word perceived subject because I think the topic is much deeper than most people want to admit to themselves, but the perceived subject is very discomforting for some. And I'll start at the outset by saying my goal here today is not to change people's minds. I mean, I'm not here to convince anybody of anything that they've decided upon when they came in that door. But I also believe that by humanizing ourselves, by talking about our lives, we can help people recognize that being different in this world doesn't necessarily mean being something that needs to be changed. And so hopefully, by the time I'm done, you will have heard something that helps you recognize things that you experience already in a new way, that will help you question things you may not have questioned in the past, because that, to me, has been the best part of this entire journey, besides the shoes. It has been the ability to question. I'm telling you, this is not going to... There. So, anyways, but part of the problem that transgender people, and I am proud to be one, is that people just don't know who we are. And sometimes we don't know who we are. And so this is my opportunity to talk to you. And my story is not in any way, shape, or form a universal story. I mean, there are as many stories of being transgender, as many ways of experiencing your gender, as many ways of expressing your gender as there are ways of being a person. So it's not as though my way, these are hard and fast rules. Unfortunately, there are far too many people who want to find hard and fast rules in life. They want to be able to boil things down to absolutes. And again, I am proud to say that life is far too complicated to let itself be boiled down to absolutes. So those looking for those kinds of answers rarely find them, because it just doesn't work that way. But the thing is that we as people have these kinds of chances very few times. When I was growing up, I'd never met a transgender people. We didn't have these kinds of things. I talked with the cast from Rent earlier today, and I asked one of the characters when he was born. He said 1989. 1989, I've got shoes that are older than that. And my son is older than that. I've never felt older than I have in these last about 2 hours. But the thing is that when I was going to school, we didn't have these kinds of things. We didn't have LGBT centers. We didn't have people coming out to share their lives and their stories. We didn't have people coming in from a beautiful day to hear about things that were different. And so to me, these are celebrations. These kinds of things are celebrations, even though the fundamental reason that we're here is a day of remembrance, which is really the only landmark day that the transgender community has, which I find tragic because it's to memorialize our dead. But the goal is not simply to memorialize our dead. It is to make sure that they are not forgotten. It is to make sure that we develop a world in which we don't have to have Day of Remembrance every year, that hate and violence based on people's discomfort, based on people's ignorance, won't be a source of mothers losing their children, of people having to die in dark alleyways, of people having to face unpleasant consequences, not for anything they've done, but for who they are. So, as I say, today is a celebration for me. Day of Remembrance is a solemn day. And something that I think is really important for us to keep in mind. I personally have spoken at 2 vigils of people who have been murdered, of people who are less than 20 years old who have been murdered because of who they were. One of them, his name was Amancio, and Amancio was 19, and his family lived in Yuma, and Amancio was a gay man, and he worked in drag along in some of the dusty strips, some of the dusty clubs along the border, and he was the main source of income for his family. And his family was the most loving, accepting, wonderful group you could ever want to know. At the vigil, his grandmother, who didn't speak a word of English, came up to thank us all for coming by giving us a cross that she had made by herself. I mean, it was just unbelievable. But the point is that when you do the things that I have done, it makes these kinds of things very personal. these things are very personal to us because it's about us, it's about our kids, it's about our kids' kids, it's about our parents. It's a very personal thing. So that being said, I don't want to bring everybody down, but I just think it's really important to understand that we're going to talk about some things that have some light moments. I think one of the key elements to life is having a sense of humor, and Lord knows I've got one because my life is like a reality show looking for a network. But the thing is that sometimes things are not funny. Things can be deadly serious, and there's a time and a place to recognize cause and effect. Oops, oh, see that? I'm just, I can't let that happen again. So I'm going to tell you a couple of funny stories just to show you the level of I'll use the word ignorance, and I don't mean it in a bad way, because we only have so many words in the English language, and that's a problem, because every word comes with a bunch of feelings. Every word has connotations. Every word has intonations. You know, like sex is one of them. How come we have the same word for that as we do for being a boy or a girl? Couldn't we have thought of other words? Because we've got a lot of letters. But the thing I'm saying is that it seems to me that language can be a barrier. And so as soon as we say something like boy or girl, all kinds of connotations come to mind as to what that means to us. And it doesn't mean necessarily to me what it means to you. It's a subjective thing. But the language is all we have to communicate these things to one another. So what I'm going to talk about are some things that are hard to communicate. I'm going to try my best. But the thing is that sometimes language is a barrier, and hopefully we can overcome the barrier. So a few weeks ago, no, this was actually a few months ago, I was on Entertainment Tonight. They were going to do a story on transgender things. And so they called me up and said, hey, would you come and talk to us? And I said, sure. So they sent this man to my house to pick me up and to help me with my luggage, because I travel heavy these days. And so this man came to help me. And I'm bigger than he was, and I felt like I should help him, but it's just not very ladylike. So, and I'm learning, you know, that it's not good for the male ego to ask if you can help them help you. It just doesn't work very well. So anyways, he helped me carry my luggage. He put it in the trunk, and we're driving. And he says, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Los Angeles. I'm going to be on Entertainment Tonight. Oh, my God, you're kidding. That's fascinating. Why? I said, well, I wrote a book a few years ago about my, you got to be kidding. That's unbelievable. I said, well, it's, you know, I don't know why me, but it is me. And so he said, well, what's the book about? I said, well, I've had a really interesting life. You know, I mean, I like to be ambiguous if I can, and because then people want to talk, and I'm antisocial. So, so the thing is that I said, well, I've had a very interesting life. I've got a son. He's 23. I was married for 20 years. I've just done a lot of things over the course of my life. He goes, well, what makes you special? And that was it. That was the trigger. I said, well, you really want to know? I'm a transsexual. And he says, you? I said, yeah, me. I'm a transsexual. And he goes, I don't think I've ever met one. And I said, well, I bet you have. We're like X-Men. We're like mutants. We're everywhere. We just blend in. And he's like, and you have a son, and you've been married? And I said, yeah. And he stopped for a couple of seconds. He goes, they must have come a long way on these surgeries if you can actually have kids now. And I said, honey, there's not an ovary in this car. And that is the reality of my world, and that he's just like, he's thinking, I said, wrong parent. So, and that's the funny thing about my life. My life is inherently interesting like that. I was at Costco. I'm a Costco fiend. One of the first questions I asked when we were looking around campus earlier, do you have a Costco by here somewhere? Because I love Costco. First place I went after I changed my name was Costco on the way home. But the thing is that I was at Costco with my partner, who's a very pretty blonde, who used to be able to take apart cars. I mean, she knows more about cars. I don't know anything about cars. But so my card wasn't working in the gas thing, and the guy comes over to me, and he starts sauntering over. His name is Tony. He's like 20-something, and he comes sauntering over. He's like, look at the two blondes having trouble with the gas pump. And I'm like, where is this guy coming from? Because again, he sees us and he makes a whole bunch of assumptions. And it was funny talking to Tony, because Tony likes to flirt, and people flirt especially with Elizabeth. But he's like, well, I'm gonna have to check to see if my equipment's working, but I think it is. I said, I'm sure your equipment's working, just worry about the gas pump. So that's my life. Welcome to it. But it hasn't always been like that. You know, I have come a long way in a fairly short period of time. Because for the first 40 years of my life, I was a straight, white, middle-class, heterosexual guy. I mean, that's what I was. And I have learned many things over the course of the last few years. Some of which I'll share, and some of which may make sense, and some of which may not. But the funny thing is that the changes I've gone through, that person you see here today, is far more than the changes between me and some of the other pictures of me on there are far more than cosmetic. I was explaining to someone earlier today that as a straight white man in this culture, you're given a significant amount of privilege that you don't recognize that you have. And I had never been discriminated against, as far as I knew, until I started my transition. Until I became Donna, and people could recognize that I was a little bit different. So when people talk to me about being an activist, and I am an activist, I mean, I would argue that I've been in some very unique and very important positions to be able to make some important decisions about and for the transgender community. But the thing is that I consider myself a reluctant activist. I didn't ask for this, but the thing is that when you start to experience discrimination firsthand, when you start to see what it does and what it leads to, it questions some significant, some very important core principles about yourself as a person. And to me, that's what this is all about. This is all about personhood. So we can talk about being a man or a woman or a boy or a girl, or being masculine enough or feminine enough, and all of the stuff that comes along with it. But at the end of it all, to me, this whole journey has just been about being Donna. The unique mutt that I am, the unique life experience that I am proud is mine. And I don't feel the need to apologize to anybody for that. And that source, that pride in being who you are, that pride in being different, that pride in refusing to be forced into a one-dimensional box, which is what happens the minute that somebody puts a label on you sometimes, the minute that happens, the minute you accept that's the minute that you accept to be treated less than a person. So I'm incredibly proud to be Donna, to be a transgender person, to have not just a community, because to be transgender is not one community. We are a community of communities. We are a very broad group of people, and some of us have directly opposing needs. I go to universities and people from gender studies programs. Anybody here from gender studies? Oh, I'm screwed. Okay. Anyways, they stand up, they say, how can you talk about this? Down with sex, down with gender. And I'm like, not in my world. You know, I'm not out to deconstruct gender as a construct. I have spent a lot of money and gone through a lot of pain to be treated in a way that feels appropriate to me. And so I'm not here to say, treat everybody exactly the same, because that's not my deal. But part of the transgender community does that. Part of the community wants that, and that's, I think, is everybody's right. My biggest motivator has always been treat people with respect. Let them be who they want to be, and realize that their being different is no threat to you. And that's hard sometimes in a world that tries to force people to be and look and act a certain way. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my story, just to try and address some of the myths, because there's a lot of that. There's a lot of myth, a lot of stuff that people think they know about transgender people, about life in general. I'm going to share what I've got. So these are all pictures of me at different stages of life, as awkward as that is. It was very difficult for me to grow a beard, and so I'm very proud of the one on the right. It's really hard for me now, but that's besides the point. But these are all pictures of me at various stages of life. And one of the things I've come to recognize is that this body that I'm in is not who I am, that this is the container for who I am. My dad died about 12 years ago, 10 years ago. God, I can't believe it. Anyways, he was 64, and he had diabetes. And so he was sharp as a tack. My dad was an academic, so I spent my childhood going to universities every year. He taught at Michigan State for a year, so I went to school in Okemos. Anybody here from Okemos? I lived in Okemos for a year. And so the thing is that when he passed away, I saw so clearly that that body, that the husk that was still there was not my dad, that the spirit, that the soul that was my father had gone. And you can put whatever kind of spiritual connotation to that you want. But the thing is that the body that was there was just a container. And it's unfortunate that we have to put so much importance on a container, because it's like a locker. It's like a school locker, you know, that's what it is. And so I found early on that this is just the outside expression of how I feel about myself to the world. Because how I look to other people, how I act to other people, affects how they interact with me. So when I talk about things like sex and gender, we're going to talk about things that to other people are absolutes, but to me, they're not. To me, these things are prisms. To me, these things are paradigms, in a way. So let's start with the early one. Look how cute that is. I was born in 1959. That makes me 38 years old. In my mind, it does. But I'm the oldest. I have a sister and a brother, and my father was an academic, you know, so we traveled to universities all over the place. And the ironic thing about life for many of us that I think is something that so many never stop to question is that the single most important decision for you and about you gets made within minutes of your birth. As soon as a doctor looks at your body and decides that the container represents a boy container or a girl container and decides that you are male or female, that single decision will affect everything about your life from that point on. From your name to your life path to decisions that get made for you and about you. It's fascinating to me how profound a moment that is based on physical inspection. And we can talk about the anomalies. We can talk about being intersex and the fact that the chromosomes are more of a definition of sex or gender, that bodies are inherently female until some point in their development. I'm not here to talk about cause. I'm not here to talk about what causes us to be the way we are, because again, I think that that's far too simplistic. I am far more complicated than a chromosome. So I'm far more complicated than a body part. But it's unfortunate, again, that we have to kind of allow people to crunch gender down to such simplistic metrics. But that's what we do. So the fact is, I don't know who in here had a blood test when they were born, but when I was born, they looked at me, they saw a body part, and they said, this is a boy. And when they said I was a boy, they gave me a boy's name. And thank God my dad won this argument, because my mom, God bless her, I love her, she's not very good at picking names. So she wanted to name me Jimmy John. And my dad, being far more level-headed, and having Jewish parents, said, how about David? And she's like, okay, that sounds good. Thank God, because that was one of the few arguments he ever won that I saw. But that's a good thing. And so when I changed my name, when I went through this process, it involves name change, and so I wanted to keep the same initials. And my mom asked me if she could pick my middle name. I was very worried. My old middle name was Guy, which is kind of ironic, G-U-Y. But so I needed a name that started with a G, and I know I'm going to offend somebody here today. I may as well start now. Gertrude or Genevieve or something that I couldn't pronounce. I could just see this. And thankfully, my mom chose the name that I had chosen, and that was Gail. So anyways, but the minute we're born, it's just fascinating to me. It's a boy, going to play sports, going to get a good job, going to make a lot of money, going to be a great provider, a great dad. Oh no, it's a girl. She's going to be feminine. She's going to go to school. She's going to have a beautiful husband and beautiful home, and she's going to be a great mom. I mean, it's incredible to me how much comes from that single decision, and how most of us never stop to question. Because all of this that comes with it, all of this responsibility and obligation and expectation seems comfortable to us. So we accept it. And to be transgender, to me, is recognition that the container does not match the soul. That my comfort, my sense of how I feel most appropriate in this world is interacting with other people in ways that we traditionally assign to girls in our culture. So there we go. That's the problem. That's a problem for me. And for a long, long time, I was asking the wrong questions because I was looking for proof. I was looking for reasons. I was doing what I had criticized others for doing earlier, which is looking for absolutes. And the fact of the matter is that this whole process for me, as much as anything, has been learning to trust who I am. It's to trust myself. And to recognize that that is no less valid than any kind of a physical indicator that I could take or that I could give. Because it's about me. It's not about you. It's about who I am and how I feel my time on this planet is best spent. And that doesn't mean anything to you and your fears and your small view of life. I don't care. But the thing is that this is how I feel best. And that's all that needs to be said. So as I've always felt in all of my activism, it's as much about recognition for respect for people to be who they are, to love who they want, to have families that can exist with dignity in this world, as anything having to do specific with body parts or sex or gender or sexuality. So this was little David in 1959. I don't think they had color pictures at the time. I think they did. I think they were called Polaroid. But, so, this was my first day of school. Isn't that cute? Well, so I came out to my mom. It was probably a dozen years ago that I came out to my mom. And my mom had no idea about any of this. You know, my mom accepted what she saw at face value. And that's another one of these myths, that we must necessarily be like, visible, that other people must inherently know that we are a certain way. My mom had no idea at almost 40 years old. And I told her, I said, Mom, you know, nothing you did caused this. Nothing you did made this happen. Because you're coming from a place where you see this as being a bad thing. And I live in a place where this is a good thing. You know, so you don't need to apologize. If anything, this is a gift. And so the fact is, though, that dressing me like this didn't help. Because I'm lucky I did not get beat up. It made me tough at a young age, because you dress your child like this and send them off to school, they're going to face some harsh times. That's just the way it is. So my dad was he was going to grad school at the University of Chicago, and so this is how we dressed in the Old West. But as you can see, very dapper, nice tie. I've worn a bow tie 2 or 3 times in my life. There's another bow tie picture coming up that's equally as amusing. And, but the fact is that my mom didn't know. You know, as young children, one of the questions people always ask, transgender people or gay people, is, when did you know? Like, it's funny to see when people talk to me about being a lesbian. It's interesting to be considered a lesbian. I didn't used to be considered a lesbian. But, so they say, well, when did you know you were attracted to girls? I said, or when did you know you were a lesbian? I said, well, when did you know you were straight? I don't understand the question. You know, you're implying that this is something that should have been one way and is another way. To me, this is just figuring out who you are. I don't see the problem. Again, life does not boil itself to sexuality in such simplistic terms to me. It's not based on body parts to me. But the fact is that most people seem to think that that you can tell at an early age. And most of us do know something's odd at an early age. But you know, when you're real young in this culture, we don't enforce gender rules very, very vigorously upon our children, our real young children. Like little Jimmy, if he's a year and a half or 2 years and mom brings him into the ladies' room, because nobody's going to care. But if Jimmy's 12 and Jimmy's in the ladies' room, there's problems. You know, if Jimmy's a year and a half and he's playing with a doll, a Barbie doll, everyone's, oh, look how cute, little Jimmy. Jimmy's 6 or 7 playing with a Barbie doll, and Dad is saying, take the doll away and teach him how to be a man. Give him a gun, give him a ball, do something. You know, rough him up, teach him what it means to be a man. I'm just telling you. So, but that's what happens. And if Dad won't do it, if Mom won't do it, then your classmates will, because classmates are cruel. How you look, how you dress, your hair, I mean, how you walk. So, you know, there's just so much to it. And so as kids get older, the pressure to act in ways that are appropriate for your perceived gender becomes more profound. And that's when most of us recognize that we're being pushed down a path that just doesn't feel right. We're being forced to interact with the world. And to me, that's what gender is. It's a prism. I interact with you. People talk to me in different ways. I'll tell you, this is funny. So my very first day at work as Donna, I go in, and there was a nice man in the badging office, and he didn't know about any of this. I mean, he just saw that I was supposed to come in, he was supposed to give me a badge. And so I go into the office, and he sees me, and he's like, okay, sweetheart, come here and have a seat, okay? And I'm like, that's the first time I've been called sweetheart at work, I'll tell you. He doesn't know, and he didn't know, because when they know, they don't call you sweetheart, generally. So anyways, he says, okay, over here, this is where it has name, that's where I want you to put your name, okay? And here it has address, that's where you're currently living. And I'm thinking to myself, did I have a lobotomy at some point? Because people don't talk to me like this. As David, I don't get this kind of stuff. You know, again, the communication was much different. And that, to me, again, is this prism of how people interact, how you are taught from a young age to interact with men differently than you are from women. And part of the problem is that when people find out, things change. That's it with me. That's the biggest problem I have with people finding out or telling people, especially people that I care about, is that the fundamentals of the relationship change. Because I like the way we were interacting a minute ago, and now I've told you something personal about myself, and something's changed. My son, God bless him, he was dating, he has a thing for goth. You know, these girls, and he'd call me over to his computer and say, do you think she's hot? And I would look at these girls and I'd say, man, she was probably a stunner when she was still alive. Because they're very pasty and white, and I mean, it's scary. And so he was dating this girl. And, you know, we'd gone through some ups and downs, and he came home one day, and this girl had painted his toenails black. I said, if your mother ever sees that, she's going to choke on her tongue, and she's going to blame me. But the thing is that we had a great relationship, and her mother was a single woman, and we got to know each other. The kids were together, and we got to talk a lot. And eventually, my son told the girl told the mother, and the mother didn't want to be with me anymore. And so one day I went out into the driveway. She was sitting in the car, and I said, "Why? What happened?" And she's like, "I don't know. I just feel uncomfortable, and I just thought we had so much in common." And I told her, I said, "We do. I mean, I've never lied to you. I've never told you anything that's not true. And just because you found something out about me, that suddenly makes it all a lie to you? I mean, that's not me, that's you, and I can't, that's not even funny." But the thing is that that's what happens, is that the fundamentals of the relationship change. And you have to be comfortable with that. My partner is dealing with issues now because her church doesn't know about her and has decided that it's not going to be accepting of LGBT people. There's an Episcopal church in South Carolina, and so now she's got some difficult decisions to make about outing herself to her church, and the fundamentals of the relationship changing, or accepting this. And so, I mean, there's no easy answers. But again, as children, we start to feel ourselves being forced into gender-appropriate roles. Clothes, how you look, how you act, what you play with. I played with everything. I played with dolls, I played with footballs, I played with I played with Army stuff. I mean, it was all good to me. None of it had a connotation to it that was bad. Here's the other bow tie. Yeah, see, you laugh. But this is that 70s show, Come to Life, or Good Thing, Bad Clothes Happen to Good People. And this was the best they had. I mean, if you went to the prom, this is my prom. If you went to the prom in 1977 like I did, this is what you would have worn. This is Tuxedo Junction's best, I promise. But the thing is that, you know, as I grew up, I knew how I was supposed to look. I knew how I was supposed to act, and I did my best, and I was very good at it. It's like being an actor and never being allowed to take off your costume, because you know how you have to be. You know what the world expects of you, and I always expected to be able to grow out of this. I always expected the part of me that was Donna, that wanted to be with the girls, that felt more comfortable doing things that I knew were not appropriate as far as my mom was concerned for people like me. I asked her one year if I could go out on Halloween as a cheerleader, and she did not like that. She's like, no, you cannot. And I'm like, why not? She says, because I said so. And this really didn't make sense to me, because it was very innocent. I mean, it really was. It just felt appropriate to me. And she's like, no, you cannot go. And eventually she got angry, and I find it ironic that year she let me go out as a drunk, you know, a long trench coat. I could go out as a drunk, but I couldn't go out as a cheerleader. But again, the lessons that you learn from your parents, feeling valued by your parents, is a very strong motivator in life for children. And at that stage of life, it was very important to me to be a good student, to be a good person, to do what I could to be a good son. And so I did. And so I did everything I could to be the best guy that I could. The one thing that became apparent to me early on is that I was attracted to girls. I loved girls. You know, I did. There was no question. So I dated, but I didn't like having sex in my younger years, because nothing reminded me more of the discomfort I felt in the roles that I was being forced to play than that. And so it just was not. It was no fun. It's fun now. No fun then. So I realized that I could do sports. So men do sports. I couldn't repair a thing. Tools, foreign to me, but sports was good. So I started to play football, and I was a linebacker. Because it seems to me, it has always seemed to me, that a good life mantra is it's better to be a hitter than to be hit. It just seems like it doesn't have to be explained. But so I far preferred being on defense and tackling people and hitting people. I mean, I hit people that didn't even have the ball because it was kind of fun. And I had a lot of aggression. You know, I mean, there's a lot of anger in here about some of this stuff. And so I was very good at sports, but the sport that came best to me was wrestling. I wrestled really well, and so I'm also an overachiever. I know that might sound odd, but if I was going to do something, I had to do it well. And so I wrestled, and I learned how in Okemos, and by the time I was in college, I was champion of all of the maritime provinces for the Canadian Intercollegiate Athletic Association. So they sent me to the national championships in the Olympic Village in Montreal. And so, you know, I was very good at it. And I had a body that fit it. I was bench pressing well over 300 pounds. My arms were 22 inches because I used to measure. I know. I was very motivated, size conscious. Ate protein powder, all this stuff. I mean, if you've lifted weights, if you've seen wrestlers, you know we're a unique group of people. Running, spitting, I mean, we do it all. And so that's what it was. It was a very self-disciplined existence. And there were only 2 seasons for me. There was wrestling season and there was training for wrestling season. It's the way it was. And that's how you have no life, but you go to the Intercollegiate Championships. And it was so ironic because I'm with the rest of the guys at these things, and they're looking at the cheerleaders or somebody in the crowd, and they would all want to do her, and I would notice her shoes. And so I knew there was something wrong right from the get-go. But that's just the reality of it for me. So nobody questioned because the container seemed to fit, and the personality went along with the container. When I was in college, drinking age was less than it is now, and so I was in college, and I was very large, and so people didn't bother me, and so I was a bouncer. And so I promise you that if you were drinking too much in a bar, and if my management told me that you needed to leave, you would leave. I promise you that you would, one way or the other. And I mentioned that to someone once, and she says, "You seem proud about that." And I said, "Well, I kind of am, because again, it was a role. I was playing it, and it worked so well that you didn't care. I didn't care if I got in a fight. If we're either going to do it gently or there's a couple bottles there. Let's see who gets one first." And so the thing is that it didn't really matter. But that all went part and parcel with the body, with the existence that I lived. And so I did the best I could. Oh, another bad one. Sorry about that. Graduated from college, Syracuse, radio, television, film, 1981. Who here wasn't born in 1981? Oh, y'all go home. See that? See that? I'm telling you, I'm graduating college and y'all aren't even born yet. Whatever. So, this is my son. This is my birthright, and back when he was cute, and we were both a lot different back then, but again, there's this life path, this treadmill that you're placed on, and you don't question. And so I didn't question. I was on it. I got married. I figured it would go away. I loved my wife. I did. I loved her to death. It was the first time I'd been in love, and I loved my wife. And we got married. I started a career. I did IT consulting. I made a lot of money. I started buying cars, because there was a time when I tried to salvage my manhood through my vehicles, which, again, as crazy as that sounds, you get in a Corvette, no, it doesn't do it. It worked for a little while because it had a really good radio. But my wife was far more competitive with it than I was, because people would want to race. When you drive up next to them in a Corvette, they want to race. But it was ironic because my wife liked beer. I've never liked beer. We'd go to a restaurant, we'd order a beer and a wine cooler, and then that's another indicator. And they'd always bring her the beer, or the wine cooler, and me the beer, and we'd have to switch. And when I was wrestling, my favorite drink when I went out was tequila sunrise. You ever seen how pretty they are? Again, it got cherry in it and a little grenadine. Nobody questioned. Nobody goes, "You gonna drink that?" I'm like, "Yeah, you got a problem with that?" No, I'm good. I'm good. You want a swig? No, I'm good. But that is funny to me, again, how through life, nobody would have said anything. Nowadays, well, we'll see. So, that's my son. Look how cute he was. But one of the questions people ask sometimes, whether I cross-dress, and I got to talk about this for a minute, because this whole thing bothers me, is that, again, some of these words have connotations, and the people in our community want these definitions that fit. So people go through and try to give absolute definitions, and for most people, cross-dressing is a creepy word. When I came out to my sister, one of the first things I assured her was that I never tried on her clothes. Because I figured that's where her little head would go, is that, wait a minute, is that why that sweater disappeared when I was in 11th grade? No, I never tried on your clothes. Because it's not about the clothes. It's really not about any one thing. That's the irony about all of this stuff, is that people ask me what it's about. And I say, it's about myself. It has nothing to do with one thing. It's not about clothes. That's crazy. To go through everything I've gone through for clothes, are you kidding me? Or sexual, anything. You're out of your mind. This is, you don't put yourself through what I've been through. You don't put your family through what my family has been through for those kinds of things. And so the fact is that the word crossdresser in our culture has this fetishistic thing, this sexual thing to it. And the thing I've come to learn about the transgender community is that we fit every definition. But the thing is that many of us are looking for our place. Many of us have a feminine component to ourselves that needs self-expression, or a masculine component to ourselves that needs self-expression in the world, not just in our heads. Because that's where Donna lived. 99.9% of the time, was trapped in a room in the back of my head where I refused to acknowledge that she was there, but she was very persistent. So it's like holding down a ball underwater for years on end, and eventually you're going to get tired, and that's what eventually happened to me, amongst other things. But the fact is that cross-dressing to me was, the few times I would do it, was a simple outlet of Donna. Nothing more, nothing less. But unfortunately, again, in the transgender community, we have this feeling that there's this hierarchy of, and if there's not surgery involved, then you're not real. Or there's transsexuals, I'll ask people, I'll say, so what's your deal? Because to me, that's a good way of starting a conversation. What's your deal? And people look at you and go, and then all of a sudden, they say interesting things, and that starts a very intelligent conversation. So you say to people, well, you know, they will say to me, I'm just a cross-dresser. Like that's like a whole thing, just a cross-dresser is like a label. I'm like, what do you mean just a cross-dresser? It's not like there's some hierarchy here. You know, if I could have soothed my needs in other ways, I would have done it. I promise you that. Transitioning for me was the last choice. This whole thing was not the first choice. This was the last choice. That doesn't mean it was the wrong choice, but unfortunately, people seem to think that this is some frivolous decision that you make, some life choice that you make, and to me, this was the last choice. So if I could have kept my life together and done things like cross-dressing or other self-expressions that were less invasive, because this has been incredibly invasive in my life, I'll tell you now, but it wasn't to be. And so things happened. But the fact is that we put these labels, and here in this culture, we live in a world that pathologizes transgender people, and that's an unfortunate thing, because, you know, we're still living in the early 1900s when this was a mental illness, when this was something that if you acknowledged it to somebody, they would recommend a lobotomy. And I'm saying that in all honesty, that shock therapy and other horrible reparative treatments were part and parcel of acknowledging that you were different. And at that point, they didn't make a distinction between gay people and transgender people. It was just all confused. That's what we were. We were confused. And we needed to be shown the way. We were not confused. We were not confused, and we're not confused now. The thing is coming to grips with it. Because as I said earlier, my journey has been more, I've been asking the wrong questions. Isn't why, how did it happen, or prove it to me? Because there's not like a litmus test where I could pee in a cup and I put a piece of paper in and it comes out pink and I say, should have been a girl. Told you. You know, it doesn't work like that. But the thing is, it's been about accepting that it is and figuring out what I'm going to do about it. And that is the reality. I've been incredibly blessed. That was a Freudian slip. Anyways, I've been blessed to have an incredible amount of support, because I found in life you need support. And there are times when it's easy to be a friend when things are good. You know, it's easy to be there. I'm there for you. You know, but when life gets hard, when tough decisions have to be made, that's when you prove who you are as a person. That's when you prove your friendship. That's when you prove things like unconditional love that we all want to think we believe in. I'm a good parent. I'm a good son. I'm a good daughter. Yeah, well, prove it. You know, love. Don't be judgmental. So I've been incredibly fortunate in that regard, in that I've had a family that's been accepting, that my son has been accepting. But the thing is, many of us don't. And so it's as important to be an ally as it is to be LGBT elemental P. You know, we can't all be fabulous and have a letter, so you can have the A. But that's an important thing. It's really important to be an ally, to be a friend, and to recognize how life-changing that can be sometimes. We were talking a little earlier. I had someone at a talk not long ago who came out and said that by coming out as an ally, her parents disowned her. That she faced the same stigma of immorality, that by supporting this kind of stuff that she was putting herself in those crosshairs, and her parents, that was endangering her parents' pathway to heaven. I'm like, you know, I'm not here to comment on your parents or your upbringing. All I can say is, you know, I applaud you for your personhood. I applaud you for being able to be yourself and to see it for what it is, because you call it what you want. You can justify it any way you want, but the fact of the matter is that hate and judgment have no place. And the fact is that you are a real friend, and I hope all of us can meet people like you, because you are the kind of people that change lives. So, my son, he came to live with me. The hardest thing I ever had to do was come out to my son. Now think about that. Think about your father or your mother, in this case your father, coming to you at 14 years old and saying, I got to talk to you about something, you know. There's been a lot of crying and yelling going on in the house, and, you know, your mother doesn't want you to know this, but you have to know. And so if I don't tell you, then in a caring way, then she's going to tell you in a hateful way. So I'm going to tell you something, and it's really important that you listen to what I have to tell, and to come out to my son. And he was very cool with it at 14 years old. He was like, yeah, I think I can deal with that. I said, really? And he goes, yeah. He's like, are you going to grow boobs? And I'm like, and I'm like, well, if I do, you can't see them. And he's like, well, no, that's not what I meant. I said, I know what you meant. And I said, well, but the thing is that, you know, that initial acceptance went away after a while. I mean, when it's one thing to rationalize this stuff, yeah, I can deal with it. I'm an intelligent person, I'm okay. But when Dad shows up, you know, with a little mousse in his hair, a little makeup on, growing body parts, all of a sudden, it's real. And you got to deal with it. And he couldn't deal with it. So we didn't see each other for almost a year. My son and I he didn't want to talk to me, and that was that. That was the hardest part of the whole transition, was my son's rejection. But the good news is that we got back together again, and eventually he moved back in with me. My son, I think I told you, he's very fiercely independent. He likes death metal, too. And he used to spike his hair with like gelatin. He looked like the Statue of Liberty. And so we lived in Austin, which is in Texas. And I told him, I said, dude, I spend a lot of money so people don't stare at me when I'm walking through the supermarket, and they always stare at us because of you now. That's what he said. And we used to bond by going to Ozfest. That was our bonding, you know, I mean, because he liked that kind of music. And we'd go there, and there would be a lot of people there like him. And so he would be in heaven. And I was in heaven, too, because I truly enjoy going places where I'm not the most interesting person. I was in Detroit one year, and Joan Rivers I was speaking at the HRC dinner. Joan Rivers was there, and I said something to the effect of, it's nice to be with a group of people where I'm not the one who's had the most surgery. She didn't think that was funny. She's got no sense of humor. Anyways, so I'm serious. Sense of humor. Did I mention that's important? Life, just if you don't have one, find one. Grow one, borrow one, because it's really important. I tell you now. It really, really is. So, my son took this. I'm getting older. Life is going on. Look at that. Look how cute he was. I know. So this was about 13 years ago. So 1996, 97. So at that point in life, we had everything that our society expects you to have to be successful. Again, it's a lie, but it's a very enticing lie. We had 2 houses, we had cars, we had pools, we had stuff, but it never went away. You know, Donna was always there going, remember me? I'm still in here. I know, shut up. But she wouldn't go away. And that was the reality, is that Donna's in here. Donna is who this is. And there was always this constant battle for this body. But the fact is that I never gave her a chance. Because I never imagined that there was opportunity for a happy life. And that changed about 13 years ago when I found the internet. Because all of a sudden I found support. I found other people like me. I mean, I found lawyers and doctors and pilots and engineers. I mean, I'd never met a transgender person. I mean, it was fascinating to me, but all of a sudden, people were out there sharing their lives and their stories, and little by little, I started to realize that, you know what? This isn't such a bad thing. There's still hope for me. I can still live a happy life, but if I keep fighting it, I won't. So, life changed for me. I'm a recovering Buffalo Bills fan, I'll share that as well. So I started going to support groups. I mean, now you live in a world where we have resource centers, where we have policies, where we have friends who are like us, where there's much more freedom than there was even when I first came out, which is 12 or 13 years ago. So the fact is that for people like me, for transsexuals, there are rules. It's not like you can just go and have surgeries. And so there are these rules called the standards of care that you have to follow. And part of that involves seeing a therapist. And then, so I started to go see a therapist. I found a therapist, which was an interesting experience for me because, yes, David, I'd never gone to see a therapist, but I used to go see this woman, blah, 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 blah. And I'm talking. I used to go at lunch from work. And I think I would be a good therapist because, I mean, she never had anything to say anyways. I did all the talking. And then she would say, well, how'd that make you feel? I said, whoa, well, actually, let me tell you, blah, 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 blah. It's crazy stuff. The stuff that it brought to mind, it was unbelievable how much stuff was in here that needed to come out. And it's fascinating to me how much sense stuff makes once you verbalize it. Because it's so complicated in your head. Once you can find a way to articulate it, it's much simpler. So anyways, I talked to her for almost 2 years before anybody else knew about Donna, except my doctor. Because one of the other parts of the standards of care is going on hormones. Hormone replacement therapy. So for people who are changing from female to male, that means going on testosterone. And for going from male to female, like I was, it involves estrogen and a testosterone blocker. So all of a sudden, I go on hormones. We'll talk about that in a minute. But so this was my first support group meeting. This was it. This was support. This was Donna at the time. And all of this is all I owned, all Donna owned. And a wig, a sweater, and jeans, and some flats, and a little bit of makeup. And these clip-on earrings that wiggled when I shake my head. And so, do you know the store Ross? Ross, we used to call it Ross, cross-dress for less. And so we would go there, and that's where we'd buy our clothes, because they were bigger. I mean, we didn't want anybody to know they were for us, but I used to go there, I shop, and this was all Donna owned. And so, but the whole thought of going out in public as Donna was terrifying to me. And it took a long time to get past that. But finally, I'm going to support group meetings. I'm meeting other people. Some of them are scaring me, and other people were feeling really good. But I'm starting to take hormones, and so life gets really interesting, because as David, life never got too happy, never got too sad, never got too, oh yeah, we kicked a field goal, oh, we missed an extra point, you know what I mean? Life is going on. Well, I start taking estrogen, like it's cold, it's hot, I'm happy, I'm sad, stop touching me, what smells so bad, you know what I mean? All of these things are happening. It's like this sensual onslaught. It's what it was. You think it's just emotions. It's not just emotions. It's everything. It's colors, it's tastes. I mean, women have it good. I tell you now. The people ask me, well, we won't talk about that, but we'll talk about sensual onslaught. And I wasn't built for this. I tell you now, I'm like crying. Before I transitioned, we watched Forrest Gump. And so there's a scene at the end where he's talking to Jenny, and she's like dead, and I'll miss you, Jenny. You know that scene? And I'm like watching this before my transition. I'm like, well, this is pretty sad. I gotta go. After on hormones, I'm watching that. I'm crying 5 minutes because I just know it's coming. It's horrible. It's horrible. I can't even watch it now. I tell you now, I can't watch it. When I watch Finding Nemo, I start it at the happy part. We don't watch the part with the barracuda because it's too scary and it makes us cry. So we watch. And so I've come And here's some of my pearls of wisdom, if I have any, is that you can glean the best things in life out of a few things. Like the most important courses I ever took in school, and I don't mean this in any mean way, one was typing. Because back, again, when I was growing up in the Stone Ages, we had these things called typewriters, and you actually had to push them over, and then you type it, they push them over, and then you type, and then you push them over, and then you type. That's the way it worked. And so eventually they moved over by themselves, they got smarter, and now they're computers, and everybody knows. Now you type with your fingers on these little things. I mean, but for me, it was typing. It was the most important course I ever took. The other most important course I ever took was Psych 101. And I just took it because it was easy. It was 3 gimme credits as far as I was concerned. So I took Psych 101. But I learned so much in that course that I've been able to use for the rest of my life. And one of the things I learned in there was about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Do you remember? Anybody know about that stupid triangle, 5 levels? And there are varying levels of complexity of human need. And we have to address all of our needs at one level before we can move up to another. And eventually, the goal of life for all of us is to be self-actualized. And there are any number of traits of self-actualized people. And you can go and you can see it. But if you read them, you'll go, yeah, I want that. Yeah, that's me. Oh, I love that. I want that. You know, I mean, you look at these traits of self-actualized people, it's pretty cool. But the way it works is that if any of the other levels gets like, something happens, you fall back down. You know, it's like a game. But so one of them is that you need to feel secure. Well, you lose your job, not secure anymore. You know, all of a sudden you're not self-actualized. All of a sudden you've got other issues. But that whole notion about being self-actualized was very important to me because that's what this is all about to me. That my journey to being Donna is just my pathway up the pink side of that triangle. That's the way it's been for me, is that that's my pathway. It's just not your pathway or your pathway, but it's my pathway. So I had to do it. And the fact is that I've had moments. I've had moments. I've got other moments where it's not true, but you know what, I have. I've gotten as close as I can get sometimes as a person. So Maslow was one of them. Another one was the stages of grief. Because we go through these steps of not accepting things, you know, of anger and denial and all of these other things. And the whole goal eventually is acceptance. And we hope we get to there. But, you know, my mom has gone through grief. When I told her, she struggled. She couldn't call me Donna for a long time. She asked if she could call me Dee. And I said, you call me whatever you want, you know, as long as you're comfortable. But she explained to me, you know, the 2 nights before my surgery, we had this really deep talk, and we never used to have deep talks. My mom would go off on some tangent, and I'd put the phone down for an hour, and then I'd come back, and she's still talking. I'm like, you're still going, Mom. And she's like, oh, where was I? I'm like, I gotta go. But now she just likes to talk, and I listen. But that night she was talking to me about grief and how she had to let go of her son, and it made a lot of sense. It did, and I respected that. You know, because she loved the person that she perceived me to be, and I respected that too. The same as I appreciated the fact that she made the efforts to love who I was now, that the relationship with her had fundamentally changed, which it had. So, but she also talked, she said, you know what really helped me come to grips with this? It was a passage from Khalil Gibran. Khalil Gibran, the prophet. He talks about your children and says, your children are from you, but you don't own them. You are the archer and they are the arrows. And she was going on about how, you know, she felt that I was, at the beginning, how I was making this decision that would make me lonely and sad and an outcast. And she realized that as time went on that she couldn't change it, that she had to accept it. And she's been loving and wonderful ever since. She has. My mom is amazing for me. But it didn't come naturally, and it certainly was a process, and there was grief involved. So, anyways, this was a bad day. So, one of the other steps in the standards of care is that you have to live as yourself for a whole year. Because it's easy to fantasize what it's like to live be as beautiful as a princess. I know we all do. But the thing is that living it day in and day out is hard. And so there is a requirement to live in your new gender for a year. And that's a hard thing to do. So when my father passed away, he left me some money. And I found that there was a surgeon in San Francisco who rebuilds faces. And that's what he does. He rebuilds them and builds feminine faces. It's fascinating. And I found her online. So anyways, I went and paid for him to take my face apart, because that's what he does. He cuts you, he pulls your face off, he removes all of the traces of masculine features, like brow bossing, and he reduces the length of your chin, and he redoes your nose, and he does stuff with your jaw, gets rid of the trachea, redoes the nose, cheeks, crazy stuff. 14 hours of surgery, and life goes on. Because it was apparent to me, and as shallow as this might sound, that I would never live the life that I felt I could live trapped in that body, looking like that. Because no matter what I did, I looked in the mirror and I saw Fabio in drag. That's all it was, Fabio in drag. And that was bothersome to me at that point in time. My whole, the irony is that my whole outlook on masculinity and femininity has changed. But at that point in time, I had very specific ideas of what being a man or a woman was like, as many people do. I got my hair cut short a few years ago. It was shorter than it is now. And someone came to me and said, "You've got a lot of courage to get your hair cut so short." And I said, "Courage with a haircut? Are you kidding me? After everything I've done, I'll tell you things that require courage. Getting a haircut is not one of them." And so the funny thing is that to her, she measured her femininity in the length of her hair. I find it fascinating. So I went and I got this surgery, and it was drastic. And as I said, after my son saw it, all bets were off. When my wife saw it, I was gone, and life was not good. We divorced, and we're still not happy. We don't talk. It's just not a good thing. She's never come to accept. And so the thing is that this whole journey has been about loss in a lot of ways, but it's also been about gain, because I've gained things that are more important than anything I can have imagined. But you have to risk. That's another one of these life mantras, is that if you don't risk anything, then you don't gain anything. That's the way it is. We're always wondering if we should risk what we have. And the answer is, whatever it is, the answer is yes, risk it. Because if you don't, you're not going to get what you could get. You're not going to experience what you could experience. And so, to me, this whole thing has been a transformative experience, far more than just the physical changes, but just in life outlook. This is what Donna looked like after I started to heal. And I came out at work, and I went and changed my name. This is a funny story. So, different states have different rules for changing your names. And so I changed my name in Arizona, and they have name change court. So it was fairly easy. You just give him a form, you go and talk to the judge, he blesses you, and he gives you a form, and your name is changed. It's fascinating. Other states, it's not so simple. And in fact, there was just a lawsuit in New York because people needed a permission slip to change their names to female names, from male to female. Transsexuals or female to male, you needed special permission to change it to a non-gender appropriate name. It's crazy stuff. But in Arizona, they didn't care. And so I went to name change court, and I was a little nervous because they were going to laugh. It was important. But the woman in front of me, she changed her name to Lady Midnight Sunshine. She did. I still think she was a porn star. I'm just saying. But and so they were still giggling, just like that. When she left, everybody had a good laugh at her expense, and so nobody batted an eye at David to Donna. I tell you, it was not funny at that point. But so I changed my name, and I went to Costco, and that was a highlight. I think I told you I went to Costco. But then but the fun thing to me is that Donna was real in the world. When I got my driver's license and they changed it to an F, Donna existed. It's really funny how silly things like a credit card or a driver's license can mean so much. And so when I started to get all this stuff, Donna didn't just exist in my head anymore. Donna was real. Donna existed in the world. And once I've had my surgery, different states handle this differently, but I was born in Illinois. They gave me a whole new birth certificate. a brand new one. And it doesn't show any, if you look in the Illinois Department of Vital Records, you'll see that a girl named Donna was born February 22nd, 1959, at 38 years old. It says it right on there. So it must be true. First day of work, this was it. This was how it looked. Again, I had to work as Donna full-time, and coming out of work was a chore. It was tough, because what ends up happening is and it still happens now, is that when you come out, the first thing people start to think about is, what about the bathrooms? What bathroom are you going to use? And I'm like, so I came out to work, and they're like, well, what bathroom? And I said, well, mascara and men's bathrooms don't mix in my world. And so what are we going to do about that? And so we came to a recognition that this was as much about personal dignity and respect as it was about the mechanics of going to the bathroom. And I explained that I didn't think that bathrooms were part of our benefit plan, that it just came with the territory. And so we did the right thing. But it's unfortunate that even today, all of these years later, and we've come a long way in recognizing our lives and who we are, and that we're no threat, and that all we want to do is live our lives. It's amazing to me that this whole notion of becoming authentic in terms of your gender somehow gets boiled down by other people to bathrooms. And it's not a rational discussion. People are like, well, you're just going to use the stall. I said, yeah, but you're approaching it from a rational perspective. And there are very few places in this world that are uniquely masculine or uniquely feminine, where only men or only women are allowed to go. And bathrooms are one of them. So you have to understand that if someone agrees that they believe you're appropriate to be in there, that they're accepting you. There was a fascinating piece on NPR over the weekend about a trans woman who was Jewish and went to the Wailing Wall in 2002, and it's segregated, so it gone to the man's side in 2002, and it has since gone through some changes and went back, and now it went to the women's side. But there are very few places, and it infuriates me that things like employment non-discrimination or hate crimes or discrimination protections of all sorts somehow can get translated into cross-dressers and perverts using bathrooms, because it panders to such base fears. But the fact is that Kalamazoo showed that this doesn't work. People are smarter than this, than that all you got to do is help people recognize what they already know. And that's so important, because we're able to humanize ourselves, because we're able to have these discussions. It's not about bathrooms. It's not about sickness and pathologizing and mental illness or perversion. This is about people demonstrating self-respect to one another. And that to me, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. So, Kalamazoo is a beacon for us, because I'm a firm believer that anytime you put the rights of a minority up for the vote of the majority, you're setting yourself up for failure. And this was an indication where the inherent good of people shines through, and that doesn't happen all that often. Maine, shame on you. That's all I have to say. So after I transitioned, I moved to Texas. And if you ever move to Texas, you have to get this hairstyle. That's a requirement. You do. I know the salon in Dallas where they do it. And it was fascinating. They did a great job. But I had never interviewed as Donna. And so I actually, this was out. I got a letter from Dell who asked if I would come and interview for a job. And I'd never interviewed as Donna, so I called up some friends. And I'm like, give me some interview tips, because this is new to me. And they're like, black pumps, short black dress. I'm like, that's it? That's the interview tip? Black pumps, short black dress. So being far deeper than that, I wore black pumps and a short black dress and got the job. But that was just a fallback plan, just in case. But I did. I got this job. I was working at Dell, and nobody knew at Dell. As far as I knew, nobody knew. They didn't ask. I didn't tell. It was my don't ask, don't tell. And so they all figured I was just the woman, and they would ask me odd questions like, does your son live with you or with your husband, your ex-husband? I'm like, doesn't live with me, because again, I didn't want to lie, but they're making assumptions. I took my son to the doctor when we went through this health intake thing, and the doctor was asking questions, and she's like, well, is Andrew your firstborn? I said, yes, Andrew is my only child. And she said, did you have him naturally or cesarean? I'm thinking, Andrew was born naturally. The only natural thing in this room, but that's, so she says, well, did you find him to be a difficult pregnancy? I'm like, oh, hell no, he was easy for me. Are you kidding me? It was funny. And my son was splitting a gut. At that point, he found his sense of humor too. So, like I said, life goes on. But that was our life. We were living in Texas, and nobody knew, and nobody bothered us, and life went on. And I've learned a few things, that if you want to keep a low profile, and I did, because my goal was only just to be Donna. I never wanted to have to come and explain. But the thing is that if you want to keep a low profile, lesson learned, don't write a book, because that's a bad thing. Because you write a book, and all of a sudden people start reading it. It's fascinating. But that's what happened. I wrote this book, and and when it's on your computer, it doesn't look like a book. It looks like a Microsoft Word document. But when you send it off and it comes back with a cover and pictures in the middle, it's a book, and people start reading it. So all of a sudden, I'd written this book, and I wrote some stuff. I sent it off. Somebody read it and said, this is fascinating. People need to hear this. And I'm like, okay. And so it came out as this book, and it was selected as a featured selection at the Texas Book Festival. And I don't read. I mean, I'll be the first to admit I don't read. Funny, someone came up to me the other day and said, women read, you need to read. I said, I don't read, I do Sudoku puzzles. But the thing is that I'm on this table, and there are all these well-known authors. Amy Tan is there, and Mitch Abloom, and I'm there, and people are coming up asking me to sign the book. And I'm said, you don't know what this is about, do you? And they're like, no. I said, well, you wait till you look at the pictures. Because people just think that you're an author, so you're famous. But the thing is that it has really been an amazing journey since then, because it has opened doors. I've been very, very involved in workplace efforts. I've become very involved in all kinds of amazing things. But in recent years, it's funny to me, because as I started to transition, it's been a whole re-socialization of how I exist. I mean, you don't realize the fact that as a girl, you walk a certain way, you act a certain way. Things just seem to come naturally to you. And the same as like bows. I don't get the bow thing. I still can't. And I still believe that curling irons need warning labels, because I burned myself on them. I was never trained, as I was growing up, to use these things. But the thing I found interesting is that as I'm transitioning, as I'm going through this process, I'm experiencing things from the other side for the first time. So, like, one of the things that really took a long time to get used to is that women don't know this, but they don't get as much personal space. They just, as men do. As men, we walk around in this bubble of personal space, and we don't want anybody to come in it. Especially other men. We're like walking around in this bubble. And that's why, as a bouncer, it was easy to walk in someone's face and invade their space and dare them to push you out of it. But as Donna, I always felt crowded. People are always in my space. People are like nearby, and I'm like, oh, get away, get away, get away. They're crowding me. But the reality is that we don't give girls in our culture as much space. And touching. Like, no, I was not used to this touching thing, because, people touching you, ha ha ha. Are you touching me? Because again, as David, nobody would touch. There was no touching. So I became very acutely aware of when somebody was touching. And so there have been a lot of things that have taken a long time to get used to. And this whole thing with giving compliments. As guys, we don't give each other compliments like, hey, bro, nice sneakers. We don't do that all that often. Well, if we do, it says something, or it seems to say something. But the thing is that just getting on the plane today, she goes, oh, I love that necklace. I said, thank you. I got it in Texas. And I mean, we're always doing this kind of stuff. It's just what we do. And I said earlier that interacting with the world in a way that makes you feel comfortable, that kind of stuff. I did an interview not long ago, and the guy was asking me if I was, if I'd ever been approached by a man. Oops. Ooh. And, I'm not the one in red, just so you know. Asked if I'd ever been approached by a man. I said, of course. When you go to a bar and you start drinking, anything looks good. And Lord knows I can look good in a bar. And just turn the lights down far enough and we're in good shape. And so the thing is, he said, that must make you feel validated. I said, why do you say that? Because to me, it doesn't make me feel valid. Because a man finds me, a drunken guy finds me an easy target, that somehow validates me? That doesn't validate me. What validates me is when I go into a restaurant in the morning and they say, good morning, ladies, table for two. You know, those are the things that validate me, because that's how I want to be treated. I don't want to be treated as some thing that needs to be won in a bar. I mean, there's just no way. But trying to explain that to people, trying to express that this journey is far more about how you treated and how you behaved in much deeper ways. And the metric of being picked up in a bar is not a big deal to me. It's not a high threshold to try to attain. So let's have a different discussion. But that, to me, has been this process, is helping people recognize that that's not the goal. You know, my goal is not to pick up guys in bars or feel good about myself that way. You know, my favorite times these days are spent with my partner and her 4 kids. She's got 4 kids, 2 sets of twins, 2 are 10 and 2 are 7. That's happiness for me. You know, when we're out together. But the irony, and I was talking to some guys earlier about this, is that it's taken me a long time. It's taken me longer to get used to being perceived as a lesbian than it did to get used to be treated as a transgender person. Because when I'm out in the world, people don't question again. I'm in a container that seems appropriate, so nobody bothers me. But the thing is that, you know, I see my partner and I see a beautiful woman and I feel love and the way that I always have, and I want to touch her hand, I want to feel her hair, and I realize that, you know, to those who are around us, it's not as simple as that. That there's an awareness of other people's discomforts or comforts. And so all of a sudden now, you know, this whole notion of being perceived as a lesbian. I have a really good friend who transitioned, and her wife stayed with her. So Julie was the wife, Jennifer transitions, and so Julie stays with her. Really good. They love each other, and Julie. So anyways, Julie, the wife, they live in Montana. Anybody here from Montana? I don't want to disparage Montana. They lived in Mizzou. So she goes camping with a group of ladies every year. These are good friends every year. And so you find that one year after the transition, they came to her and said that nobody would share a tent with Julie, the wife. And she said, why not? And she said, because now you're a lesbian. Think about that for a second. That's crazy talk. But again, in people's simplistic minds, when you're in love with another woman, you're a lesbian, and that somehow makes you crazed for other women. Again, this whole thing, it's beyond me. But the fact is, we have this simplistic, once we allow, at the outset, I said language is our worst enemy. So anytime I try to define something or anytime we try to explain it, all of a sudden we try to apply a word to it and then it changes. But the fact is that this is a big deal. And to be transgender, to me, has become a gift. It sounds cliche, but I truly believe that we're living in a golden age. When the president of this country can say the word transgender like it's nothing, and we can start passing inclusive hate crimes legislation to codify things that we believe, to me, those are truly amazing things. And I have come to understand that the most important thing any of us can leave is our legacy, is a legacy that the world that we leave is better than the world when we got here. And you can't change everything, but you know what? By being who you are, by being vocal, by sharing, you can change the world a little bit at a time. So I've been involved in a number of important things. I've had a number of good opportunities. I've been on the Business Council for the Human Rights Campaign. So if you see any workplace policy, and I would argue that this country, the LGBT people have won as many rights as we have because corporate America has been leading the way. The fact is that my name is on most of it. Since 2002, I was one of 2 people helping to make that policy and put those tools together. I was the first transgender person on the board of directors for the Human Rights Campaign. I resigned in 2007 over a piece of legislation called INDA, when transgender people were stripped out. I found that I was the first board member for GLAAD, Gay Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. I'm on the board of National Gay Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. I'm on the board of advisors for National Center for Transgender Equality. I'm on the Transgender Advisory Committee for Out and Equal Workplace Advocates. I've been on HIV/AIDS organizations. I mean, what this tells you is that Donna, A, has too much time, and B, doesn't know how to say no. I mean, it's both of these things. But it also tells you that I've been involved with some pretty amazing people, and I really have. But the thing that has always guided me isn't that I'm the most qualified person. It's that I've built personal relationships with people who are in positions of influence, and they learn to trust me, and they learn to feel comfortable around me, and they ask me to be involved. And so that's how I have become a voice at the table. That's how I have found ways to be able to express our needs. And half the time, that's all it is to express the needs of transgender people. Because you don't know it, but transgender people, for most companies, don't get pharmacy benefits for their hormones. I mean, if you as a woman go and get estrogen because you're going through menopause, you'll get it. But as transgender people, we don't get it. So the fact is, highlighting the fact that there are these exclusions and then putting together a plan to get past it is really important, for not just for symbolic reasons, but because it has to do with our day-to-day health. And that's why things at schools, educational opportunities, it's very, very important for us to be able to humanize ourselves. This is at one of the dinners I got to go to. I get to do fun things. She was in Tootsie. What's that? Jessica Lange. Yeah, Jessica Lange. She had almost as much surgery as I have, too. I'm just saying, just warning you. But I get to do some pretty fun things. I mean, it's not all work. I mean, it's not like, but it's been very fulfilling and very challenging. And so I firmly believe that it's the kids of this world that will change this world, that the kids of this world are the ones who will inherit what we do, and they will move it forward. That there will be a time when people will look at same-sex relationships and say, what's the big deal? When loving relationships, when loving families will be recognized with every bit as equal merit as heterosexual couples and heterosexual relationships and heterosexual families. When to be unique in terms of expressing your gender is not something to be feared, but it's something to be celebrated. When personal identity isn't something that's used to define you. It's used something to complement who you really are. And those are things that people of my generation didn't get to grow up recognizing when we didn't have these kinds of opportunities. But those are the things that are going to change this country. And those are the things that are going to make it so that at some point, the struggles that we face today will become the foundations of the victories of tomorrow. So all I can say is that each of us, just by living our lives, by refusing to be, ooh, did you see that? There's a fly. By refusing to be forced into a box, well, fine, we can make a difference. And that, to me, makes all the difference. So with that being said, we've got a little bit of time left, and I like to leave time for questions, because people always have questions. So just know that if you ask something, I will answer it. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that if there's a question, Yes, I'm going to repeat the question so it goes so. I'm going to repeat the question. So who's got a question? So we can answer it. It can be anything.
Did you have any voice training or diction training?
The question was whether I had any voice training or diction training. And the answer is yes. You know, the funny thing is that for male to females, transsexuals, we start taking estrogen, and some things change. If you're female to male, they start taking testosterone, and other things change. And the voice is one of those things. You know, the voice deepens. For us, it doesn't change. So I was very self-conscious about my voice for a long, long time because I never imagined that anybody would ever envision it as feminine. So I've been told it's husky and sexy, so which I said, well, thank you. That's the second, the thing that made me most proud is when at work, and this is ironic, I'll get back to that in a second. You know, I have all these traits, and a lot of the traits that I exhibit are, you know, some confidence. Again, and it really amazed me to see the level of some of the women that I knew and their level of low self-esteem and low self-confidence, and they've been raised like that from a young age. And so, you know, when I went to Dell, I had a number of women I worked with who didn't know, who asked me to be a mentor because they admired some of these traits they saw in me that they wanted to establish in themselves, which, again, I think our culture usually assigns as fairly male traits. But the first time that I really appreciated it was when someone called me a bitch, because that's the word we have for that in the workplace. And so that was a big deal for me. But part of it, when it comes to communication, is that I went to go see this speech pathologist. And we started talking not just about voice, but about communication, about how men communicate differently, and just how men and women use communication as different tools. Because typically, and again, these are stereotypical, but typically men will just use it to tell you the facts. They don't want to get too deep, but women use it as a vehicle to express much deeper things. And so there's much richer vocabulary. When I went to Costco one time, I bought this purse. It's not this purse, but oh, there's my purse. And it was a very pretty pink purse. And so I went to the back and I filled out the little coupon. You know, when you go to Costco and then we went to the front, you have to give them a little ticket in a cage and then they bring it to you. So I filled out the stuff, paid for it, went to the cage, gave the lady the ticket. She looked in the back and said, the last one we have is the one in the display case. Do you want it? It's perfect. I said, sure, that's fine. So she called on a little walkie-talkie and said, we need a purse out of the case. And there was a man at the other end. He said, okay, I'll go get it. And so he goes over the case and he goes, which one? And so she says, the fuchsia one. So it's real quiet at the other end. What's fuchsia? And we both said this time, pink! Because you didn't know what fuchsia was. Anyways, it was funny. But the thing is that we talked about, you know, that as a guy, you say, well, it's by the green car. And now it's like foam green, pine green, you know, all these greens. It's really funny. But expressing yourself with your hands, I mean, it's just amazing to me. And we talked about how voice training, typically, women resonate in their sinuses. And men resonate in their throats and in their chest. And so it's not as much about, you know, pitch or other things, although that's certainly part of it. But we talked a lot about how you make sounds, and typically feminine ranges and masculine ranges. And I used to practice with a little keyboard. And over the years, it's gotten where I want it. At least it feels like it fits. You know, that was the problem, is that in the old days, everything felt like I was trying to make it happen, and now it just seems to fit. You should hear me in the morning before my coffee. It's not quite so, it's not pleasant. But the thing is that I finally come to feel that my voice represents who I am. And so whether, you know, it's feminine or not, or I've gotten to the point where I really don't care, because it's Donna's, and that's where I am. But good question, thank you. Other questions? Uh-huh.
Are you married right now?
Am I married right now? And the answer to that is no. Transgender people, like in most states, in every state that I know of, if we were married before and we stayed married afterwards, those marriages are recognized. So those are legal same-sex marriages, believe it or not. That's a loophole. It's like a loophole. But different. It's kind of a tough loophole to go through, though. It's a lot of work. But the thing is that we don't want, I'm not married, you know, because if I were to get married, I'd have to be married to a man, because my birth certificate says I'm female, remember that? So anyways, so I'm